My God. Hi, everyone. Um, Good evening, and welcome back to this video where we are understanding um, some concepts relating to discrimination and this way of thinking, some concepts that they need to be understood. So let's kick off with this. Okay, it says modernity. Modernity is inherently based on the belief that the continuous and unlimited development of scientific knowledge will empower humanity. The modern ideal is that, um, yeah, we have another concept here to highlight. It is modernity, and as it says, is inherently based on the belief that the continuous and unlimited development of scientific knowledge will empower humanity. This verb. Um, the modern ideal is that through science, human beings will become masters of nature. In Bacon's words, human knowledge and human power are synonymous. Modern science rests on a notion of humanity in which existence is essentially a will to power. What is proper to humans is the need to affirm personal power by dominating the world. Modern science was born of the irresistible ambition to conquer nature and subordinate it to human needs. This first, this modern thirst for domination would not be satisfied without also controlling society. We have enlightened modernity initiates a shift in world understanding, according to which it is not only possible but desirable to carry out a rational is desirable to carry out a rational foundation of law and morality. Yes, exactly. This project is underpinned by the belief in the unlimited power of reason to perfect ethical consciousness, to perfect. In those optimistic times, people believed that evil, being the result of ignorance, could be eradicated through knowledge. Um, it was trusted that eliminating ignorance, society would reach its greatest splendor. Modernity heralds a future of light and progress in contrast to the economic, intellectual, and moral misery of pre-modern societies. Of course, such a conception is only acceptable within a philosophy of history that assumes not only cultural difference as a given fact, but also some heuristic model of perfection that dictates the path people should follow. A heuristic, some heuristic model of perfection. We have civilizations as the goal of universal history, coloniality, um, This concept emerged in the 18th century, but its roots are ancient, tracing back to the Greek politeia, the Latin civitas, and the Italian civiltà. All are systematic denials of any cultural diversity foreign to their own customs and values. All are systematic denials of any cultural diversity foreign to their own customs and values. To civilize is a project based on Europe's self-affirmation as the culminating point of universal history. This is something that Hale says. It's a project based on Europe's self-affirmation as a culminating point. The concept of civilization carries an ethnocentric charge, typical of communities afflicted by a narrow, ignorant, and often fierce localism. Since the idea of humanity is the civilized man, from the perspective of coloniality, it is legitimate to use any means. It is legitimate to use any means necessary to bring all societies to that blessed state. To that blessed state. In this sense, the violence exercised in the name of the civilization is seen as a kind of ritual sacrifice. Wow. The civilizing hero views his victims as sacrificial offerings. The colonized indigenous person, the African slave, the woman, the ecological destruction. In other words, it is assumed that for the perfect man, Western European modern white, to fill the face of the earth, all other forms of humanity must be eliminated, whether through extermination or civilization processes. Okay, now we have the barbarian as an obstacle to modernity. In classical Greek thought, being a slave and being a barbarian are the same by nature, since all foreign peoples were considered barbarians and those naturally slaves. This difference explains the, the, the participation of the few and the exclusion of the many from public life. According to Aristotle, although all men are rational by nature, they differ significantly. The slave participates in reason only in the sense that he can understand orders, but he is incapable of deliberation. For this reason, he lacks the capacity to make decisions about self-governance and governing others. In Aristotle's words, he who can foresee by the use of his minds is by nature intended to be Lord and Master. Who can foresee by the use of his mind is by nature intended to be Lord and Master, and he who can with his body give effect to such foresight is a slave by nature. Aristotle claims that nature has made some men to rule, others to obey. This conception, clearly ideological, combined with the principle that justice dictates that the inferior must submit to the superior, leads to the conclusion that for the common good, the inferior individual must assume his natural subordinate role under the master's tutelage. Over time, this ideology would be invoked to justify the conquest of peoples deemed barbaric, those who reject right reason and the common way of life of mankind. It goes without saying that by reason we mean scientific instrumental rationality. Okay, it goes without saying that by that right reason we mean scientific instrumental rationality, and by the common way of life of mankind, Western life. The common way of mankind, Western life. The ultimate goal of the civilization of the civilizing process, driven by the conquerors who called it the New World, only by reference to their own, was to integrate indigenous people into European customs by clearly violent means, and so that later, once assimilated, they may use rational argument. The civilization of indigenous people was understood as a process of humanization. Yes, as a process of humanization. From the Eurocentric perspective, civilizing the natives required the destruction of the identity of others through colonization that imposes its own way of being as normative. This destruction was legitimized through the prejudice of one's own superiority, a deeply rooted notion in political and historical philosophies. A deeply notion in political and historical philosophies from, from antiquity through the medieval modern period. As decolonial thought has pointed out, um, coloniality, coloniality and modernity are inseparable social phenomena. Coloniality and modernity are inseparable social phenomena. In those words, modernity originated in the free medieval European cities, centers of immersed creativity, but it was born when Europe was able to confront the other and control, defeat, and violate it when it was able to define itself as a discovering, conquering, colonizing you. Okay, my God. Okay, then we have the colonial difference, foundation of the coloniality of power, the coloniality of knowledge, and the coloniality of being. And for that purpose, we'll have to um, translate all of this. Just give me a chance. Okay, we have culinary of knowledge. Come on, come on, come on. Oh my god, that's too much. Okay, I suppose it would be smaller, but I think we need to we need to finish until the culinary of being, because it's gonna be like much more. Okay, so let's put this a period to start translating from ChatGPT, and then we have a possibility to understand the thesis and some concepts. As you know, I do this because I only need to practice and put it everything into my mind and start talking about this uh, by highlighting some actions and verbs to understand the process of the ideas and the structure of some ideas. Um, so for me, it's quite necessary to apply this methodology of uh, translating something into English first, not because of me, because my active part is not translating as a as the IA as the AI, sorry, as the AI can do this, but my role is to interpret it, to capture, to construct my own knowledge from that translation, and to internalize it into myself and understand the concepts and explain it on my own. That's the goal of this method. Okay, now we have the colonial difference, foundation of the coloniality. Okay, so let's start this. It says, according to Mignolo, okay, yeah. Okay, we have done this now. Okay, thank you so much. Here is the English translation of the text. Okay, now we have the second chapter. Oh, we have this chapter, the colonial difference, foundation of the colony of power. And it says, according to Mignolo, the world system is the origin of the establishment of the colonial difference. This is a category through which an undeniable fact is uh, referenced, namely the production of two radically opposed models of subjectivity, the enlightened subject and the colonial subject. Okay, this classification expresses a logic of negativity, according to which that which is different in relation to modernity is by definition inferior. The classification expresses a logic of negativity, according to which that which is different with the intention of justifying the domination of other peoples. Colonial power initiates a suspicion regarding the humanity of colonized subjects, which constitutes an attempt to rupture the universality of human dignity. When suspicion becomes affirmation, the colonial difference arises. Ultimately, this consists of a system of distinction and hier hierarchization that classifies populations by their differences or excesses. Okay, a system of distinction, as well as a series of technologies for their governance. The epistemic operations that establish the colonial difference are the colonization of time, the colonization of space, and the denial of contemporaneity. Of contemporaneity, the colonization of time, the colonization of space, and the denial of contemporaneity. Colonization is the origin of the coloniality of power, whose foundation is, according to Mignolo, the colonial difference. It is through the latter that the subalternization of subjectivities and knowledge occurs. The subalternation of subjectivities and knowledge occurs. Mechanism, a mechanism through which a social order is established, where each person is assigned a predetermined social position in terms of access to goods, services, and rights. In this order is interpreted as something given by nature. Okay, it is similar to a naturalization. All of this is because, according to Mignolo, the world system is the origin of the establishment of the colonial difference. So this world system makes a logic of negativity. It is it is it, it has produced two models of subjectivity. On the one hand, we have the enlightened subject, and on the other hand, we have the colonial subject. So we have a difference, a colonial difference, because if you are not part of a civilization, what you are different, you are different to you are distinct. So it means that you are not civilized. You are not a civilized person, but you are inferior person. So that makes a hierarchy, and also creates a subalternization. And then this mechanism gives a social order. And then when you are born, over time, when you are born in this social order, you think that the way you don't have access to some goods or services is because this was given by nature. You normalize this situation. So ugly. My God. Colonial subjectivity encompasses all social groups. Exactly. Deemed inferior because of their knowledge. Deemed inferior because their knowledge. Worldviews and ways of life are alien to modernity. That's true. Inferiorization is expressed in social stereotypes and stigmas that lead to discrimination. The defining trait of the colonial subject is the colonial wound. Is the colonial wound. The colonial wound. Let me. I mean, it was wound. No. Yes, it's a colonial wound. The colonial wound. This category refers to the mark left by suffering, which is caused by experiences forced in situations of marginalization, subjugation, injustice, inferiorization, disposability, and death. Oh my God. Subjugation, injustice, inferiorization, disposability, and death. These experiences sadly have marked the histories of indigenous, Afro-descendant, and migrant subjectives and migrant subjectivities. Recognizing the colonial wound is the first step toward toward adopting a new perspective that, in contrast to Eurocentric vision, advocates for the recovery of modes of existence, forms of thought, and paradigms of action, which, to, which due to their original nature, neither can nor should be included or absorbed into Western history. Recognizing the colonial wound is the first step toward adopting a new perspective that, in contrast to the Eurocentric vision, advocates for the recovery of modes of existence, form of thought, and paradigms of action, which due to their original nature neither can nor should be included or absorbed into Western history. That makes me think that I'm not doing a Western history because of the metrics of the Western world, of neopositivism and positivism. But I think that we should make science according to my chronogram and my educational model, that educational model that disciplines such as sciences or some narratives should be included in comparative um, chronogram that can where many teachers can experience that they have a wide vision or a wide sight of their disciplines, and I think that they so people could interact with others to make this interdisciplinarity some real something real. Yeah. I think, for example, when I go to some science class, I think they don't have any idea of their history. And when I see some historian classes, some historians giving or delivering classes, I don't see them like going for some facts or science or some knowledge that can bring them to have some interests and to pursue some methodological issues, but because they have interest of some facts that cannot be their own facts, their own social phenomena, their own processes. But I think that's something that is misunderstood about history and historiography. It is because it has just been something currently about postmodernism and this idea of small narratives of microhistory, history of women, and history of culture. So history has just um, focused on more different narratives rather than a big narrative that can contemplate this intercultural background. But I think from its perspective, this universal background is is needed, and on that canvas we can understand what is universal, what is truly universal. Universal is not something that can that can be given only from the Western culture, but it has to be modeled by other narratives from other cultures. That's it. Okay, so for me, Western history is not the only one. History is not the privileges. Is it doesn't have the privilege to tell uh, the history of the world according to its size, according to its shape, but it's necessary make some more intentions about history and sciences, I think that if you if, if there would be a educational model of bringing, you know, that where many universities can have this interest of a universal intersubjective dialogue, we can understand that uh, we are much better than our own pluriverse dialogues. There's something here that confront my vision to my teacher's vision, because my teacher's vision uh, goes for the goes for pluriversalism, and pluriversalism is for me the the rise of giving voice from their own structure to people, to bring and to reintegrate people to a mystical world, to a religious world, because science and modern science has become the great prejudice from ancient times. When I mean ancient times, from the rise of modernity, from the rise of enlightenment that has become whole as scientific knowledge, as the better to make morality and ethics the way of our perfection. And we have this differentiate the world from one modernity to the ancient modernity. What confronts, what truly confronts my own vision to Lucero's vision, to the author's vision, is exactly that she thinks some myths can can revital, re, revitalize, revitalize, revitalize um, other great structures that can bring some human perceptions to, and can combat this great structure of modernity. I'm not sure. So that's it. That's it. Okay, so bye bye.